Welcome back to every naval battle in history. Last episode we covered the Battle of Cynossema, in which the Athenians, wounded and divided, once again beat the Spartans at sea to keep the tradeways open and the people of Athens fed. At this point in the end of the Peloponnesian War, major battles that would normally have defined an era were now occurring every few months. At Eretria in 411 BCE, not long after Cynossema, the Spartans finally figure out how to win consistently at sea, which leaves Athens with ever fewer options. So where is Eretria? Let's not confuse it with the country in Africa. Eretria was a powerful city in antiquity. The name literally means city of rowers, which is a good sign in a maritime era. All the way back to the Persian Wars, they'd stayed in the middle of all the trouble that Athens was cooking. Positioned in the middle of the island of Euboea, the big island off the eastern coast of Greece that looks as if it isn't an island, but if you really trace around it, you discover that as impossible as it looks, it doesn't actually join up anywhere to the Greek mainland. Eretria was as close as Athens' allies got. But the empire is ending. By 411 BCE, Eretria had enough. The Athenians levied extortionate amounts of money to be part of their empire, or league if you're still hanging on to that fiction. With the writing on the wall since the Sicilian expedition debacle, the whole empire was looking for a way out on the twin grounds that A. Athens was too weak to attack them, and B. Athens was too weak to protect them. At which point, one might ask the lads at the dock to stop loading the treasure ship up, and let's just see who comes asking about the shipment. At this point, a Spartan fleet sailed north. This was observed in Athens to the great distress of supporters of the recently deposed democracy and the elite 400 of the ruling oligarchy alike. As if having Spartans looting the countryside beyond the walls wasn't bad enough, the Athenians were busily fighting each other. Which is not so hard to understand considering this war had been raging for 20 years, which is a lot of time to be cooped up behind walls with people you didn't like very much to begin with. There was rioting in the streets, and the Democrats accused the oligarchs of plotting to help the Spartans invade to destroy the Democrats, which in fairness was what the oligarchs delivered as a final outcome, deny their interest though they might. And when they weren't fighting each other, or the Spartans, or the Spartan allies, the Athenians were fighting their allied city-states who wanted a better deal. An Athenian fleet of 36 ships went north to try and stop them. The Spartan fleet numbered 42 ships. The Athenians stopped in at Eretria to reprovision. Long-term allies, nothing to worry about here, right? Sure, from an Athenian perspective. The Eretrians, on the other hand, might remember that they'd been dragged into the Persian Wars with Athens, and while great heroism had saved Athens, Eretria had been looted and its population dragged off to Persia in subjugation. The glories of Thermopylae, Marathon, Plataea and Salamis probably weren't recalled in quite the same way in those parts. Safely in the Eretrian harbour, taking on provisions, the Athenians might have wondered just why a huge signal fire had been lit. And they figured out the answer when the Spartan fleet, summoned in by the Eretrian beacon, entered the harbour, caught them at anchor, and began destroying their ships. The Athenian sailors and marines who fled into the city were butchered in the streets by the Eretrian citizenry in scenes familiar to Game of Thrones fans. Eretria, as with many of the Athenian Empire's member states, was well past the point of paying for Athenian glories, let alone the disasters. The tide had not just turned now, but was in flood. Athenian cities were happily returning to the Persian fold in the east. The taxes were lower and they were allowed to retain their democracies, something not guaranteed under the new Athenian management. In mainland Greece, rivers of gold were flowing from Persia to Sparta to fund their naval expansion. This brought huge problems to Spartan society, which until now had been against the existence of coined money, preferring the old aristocratic standbys of land and slaves, but in the short term it gave them a counter to the rivers of gold that Athens had relied on from trade and tribute. Athens wasn't beaten yet, but there were precious few paths to victory left. Strap in, folks, we've got lots more to cover as we take on every naval battle in history. Smash those like and subscribe buttons, you don't want to get left behind.